This is an unedited, rambling response to Losoyo and his video that's calling out atheists. Yes, it's another video calling out atheists. Because what the world needs now is another video calling all atheists or questioning atheists. A question for all atheists. That's what we need. And I wish that Veritas48 would come back, because I think his 5 questions were the most responded to and most unifying questions. That everyone had an answer to those. But Losoyo's question, it was pretty much about how do you go about, as an atheist, deconverting a Christian that you want to remain friends with. Now, the first thing I have to say about this is this is an interesting question for me to tackle, especially because I have, in my own life prior to YouTube, and even here on YouTube, had experiences where I changed someone's mind about something and wasn't still on good terms with the same person later on. Sometimes some of the points that you make to people can be so cognitively dissonant that you are seen as a bad person for bringing it up. It's kind of like taking away a baby's security blanket. How delicately do you do it? Or pulling a Band-Aid off of a kid's skinned knee. So the rest of this video is going to be powered by Mountain Dew. I still don't have any endorsement by them, but I don't have any support. But I love Mountain Dew. Now, on my channel page, I have a quote that I came up with myself, and it goes, "If the grip of a delusion can only be broken by an abrupt shock, then you're going to have to decide for yourself whether you're strong enough to help people." And from Losoyo's video, I am taking it as a given that no abrupt shock measures are to be taken place for this scenario where an atheist is deconverting someone. Now, Losoyo gives a description of this person, which basically, to sum it all up, this person is just like you, is like your best friend. But still, I don't feel in this entire description that Losoyo gives that we really have this person that we're talking about fleshed out. And so, to answer this question, I'm really relying on my own personal preferences and my own personal strengths in arguments for where I would start the discussion on how to get my best friend from being a Christian to being not a Christian. And this video is pretty much, I guess, I'm just going to think up all the different things that I could talk about, but I'm not really going to go into depth too much about them. I'm going to put a link to Losoyo's video in the description box. I'm so glad I remembered that at this point in the video, because I don't know if I would have remembered it later, because this is a ramble. I'm also going to put a link to a video called Unicornism, or it was my response to somebody else's video called Unicornism. But that was one discussion I've had like this that went a little bit further into detail. And then another one will be my fair share video for Honest John. I think that goes down an argument train of thought pretty well. So I'll leave those links in the description box. Now, as far as things to talk about with a theist that could get them to rethink their religious positions, my personal favorite, and the one that I have spoken about the most here on YouTube, is the argument from the lack of empirical evidence. And the particular way that I like to attack this problem is attacking the false virtue of faith. And it really has to do with defining what faith is. That can plant a seed in a way that doesn't offend people at first when you just try to define, what do you consider faith versus what other religious people consider faith versus what I would consider faith, which is the opposite of having evidence, and verification. Faith is believing in something without those things. So, the second thing, I guess, that I would be uniquely qualified to talk to people about would be the psychological aspects of how religion can affect someone, especially whereas you can describe religion as an addiction, a social addiction. Now, I try to stay away from the quote Karl Marx coined when he said, "Religion ist der Opiat of der Volks," because I don't like atheists and communists to be mixed together. It's confusing to some people, but what I'm getting at is that there's a real addiction to the fellowship of churches. There's a real addiction to the ecstatic state that some people get in charismatic churches. And there's an ease or laziness in thinking that can come with religion that can be addictive. Basically, you can opt out of any thought that is causing you a little bit of stress in your head. You can't wrap your head around something. You just say, God did it, that can be overused by some people in an addictive way. And I can talk about that in a way that doesn't really offend someone. They can see where I'm getting it at without personally being offended at first, before turning the subject to, how it's psychologically affecting the person I'm talking to in particular. I can lay the foundation for how it affects other people so that they can understand where I'm going. Now, the third way that I would start talking to my friend would actually be, I guess, the first way that a lot of my friends would start. But they are qualified to talk about that a lot better than I am. But, what little I can go into, it's the problem of evil. And the reason why that would be not my first choice is because I have come to the realization that even with every argument for the problem of evil laid out, it is possible for two people of the same intelligence that, the way that Losoyo is describing this best friend, he's just like you. It's possible for two people that are almost the same in every way to look at the same problem and come up with a different answer on this one. But with the problem of evil, I would say that some of my friends, like Violently Graceful and Mega Chepo, they're uniquely qualified to talk about the problem of hell in particular. Um, and I think I can talk about another aspect of that, but just with the problem of evil, the problem of hell is something that it's a little offensive to people. You know, they will kind of retreat a little bit when you say, well, how could you be happy if you're in heaven forever and you know that there are people in hell? You know, you don't even have to say, you can try to not be offensive by saying, what if your daughter went to hell and you were in heaven forever? How would you be happy forever? You know, heaven's not eternal happiness if you for 1 second think that your daughter's in hell. That would be offensive to a lot of people. But you can say, how can you make it to heaven with your whole family, and know that some unknown to you person is burning forever for something that was completely temporal that they did. Completely, like any like if you were to kill someone here in the real world, you'd probably get a sentence of 25 to life. Um, Steal something, you can get a lesser sentence. But the sentencing by God is eternal, and whether you believe it's burning or just uh, an absence of God's presence in your spiritual being, it's still forever. Uh, there's a whole bunch of other arguments that you could bring up to talk about. One would be the problem of religious diversity. Like, you can ask your friend, why does it seem like you're more likely to be part of a religion if you're born in the same geographic area as everybody else that is part of that religion? And it kind of runs into the all babies are atheists argument, where you get across the notion that people have to be taught about God. And where a lot of people go wrong with this, in my opinion, when they're arguing this, is there's a whole bunch of other concepts that are not universally known that you really have to be socially indoctrinated to accept as real. And they don't even have to be religion, but they are taken on faith, like the existence of a soul, or the existence of sin, or the existence of evil itself as like a presence in the world. These things, when they're taken as givens first, it's really easy for one person to convert from, say, Christianity to Islam, or from Judaism to Christianity, because the foundation of these beliefs isn't really, Jesus or Yahweh. It's really belief in sin as this mucky spiritual stuff that sticks to you when you do something wrong. So there are societies where evil is not considered to be a presence in the world, and people don't grow up thinking that. There are societies where you're not given this belief that there is a soul at all. You don't get indoctrinated with that idea. So yeah, there's problems with religious diversity that you can talk about, and some people would go right to, well, if you don't believe all these other religions, every reason that you have for not believing all these other religions is pretty much the reason why I don't believe in yours. That's the I'm only atheist for one more religion than you are argument. And it's really that argument suffers by a lot of people screwing the pooch on it when they put it that way. But there is something to talking to your friend about other religions first, and then after you have discussed all the aspects of why all these other religions have problems with empirical evidence, problems with archaeological evidence, problems with flying in the face of science, then when you have all these arguments laid out for all these other religions, when you talk to your friend about his religion, you have a lot of the arguments already gone over in a much less threatening way. Let's see. Along the same lines of all the evidences against all these other religions, you could start out talking to your friend by saying that naturalism, or starting with a belief that there is no God and just using what we know from science and what we know of the world around us with empiricism, naturalism predicts a universe as we would see it right now, as opposed to thinking that there's some sort of divine inventor, or some rhyme or reason to things. Naturalism predicts much more accurately what our world should look like. And this is just an entire video about talking points that you could talk about with your friend. And if now, see, I've been toying with this idea. Okay, this is why this video is a ramble, because this is way off topic. I've got this idea that maybe we could take a lesson from porn. Okay? And if your friend that you're trying to deconvert from Christianity, if he yells out the safe word, like, snuggle bunnies, then you stop with that argument and let him digest it a little bit. Because I have had problems with people considering me the bad guy and really taking it personally when I attack an idea, because that idea is connected to their own identity in a way that I really can't remove from their identity. So maybe we could come up with safe words, just like porn. If you got too far down into an idea that where someone's really starting to freak out, like, oh no, if I accept this idea, my whole world's gonna change. Before they get to that point, and you're causing them a lot of mental stress, they could just yell out, "You're my sugar burger," and then you stop, with all the sadomasochistic arguments where you're really giving them one. You know what I'm saying? So, hopefully that wasn't too graphic for Losoyo, and he will watch the rest of my video. So, aside from those, there is a range of subjects that get talked about a lot here on YouTube, but in real life, they tend to offend first, rather than getting your point across. The first argument like this that I can think of is, say, arguing that people who don't believe in God care about their one and only lives that they know that they have a lot more than people who do believe in God, you know. And the most offensive tactic when using this argument is to show an airplane flying right into the World Trade Center, because we know that the terrorists who were on that plane, they pretty much believed that they were going to get some virgins in the afterlife, you know, and they weren't thinking about the one life that they had right now. But there are better ways to attack this argument that wouldn't be offensive to this friend. Say, you know, the argument that you should give to a charity rather than pray that a charity gets more money. You know, do something, don't just pray about it. Yeah, so another thing that it surprises me sometimes when this offends people, but it goes like this. When you are free from the dogma of religion, you can have a better life. And a lot of people, they just don't agree with this. And many times they have personal testimonies that say, you know, if I didn't have God in my life for this certain part of my life, like for my divorce or during this time when I had leukemia as a kid, if God wasn't there for me, then I never would have pulled through. And I actually have a friend myself. His name is Daniel. He's not Dan the man with the beer in his hand. He's Daniel, the one that had the headlight on his head in one of my videos from probably November. So if anyone's wondering which Dan I'm talking about, he's actually told me that if he were to find out that there was no God, he would kill himself because he would feel like there was no hope. And to describe how much better I feel about the world since becoming an atheist rather than when I was religious as a child, you know, that is one thing that you could get across to your friend who you're trying to deconvert, is that it's not this horrible thing. You know, it doesn't result in depression, you know. But for some people, this just doesn't work. And a lot of them have experiences in their testimony for God where they just had a lot of praying at the same time that something good happened, or when something bad happened, and it gave them solace in their life. So now I've had really heated discussions with friends about the harmful influence of religion on society. And here on YouTube, a lot of it gets turned into, you know, well, atheists are harmful too, you know. And a whole bunch of other fallacies. But I've had a lot of conversations about how religions have suppressed science in the past. And if someone were to use arguments based on like what happened to Galileo Galilei, you know, that just falls flat because that was in the past, you know. The Dark Ages were in the past, and you know, you can't really make an argument that now we're less religious so we have less science, because a good portion of the scientists in the world, they have religious beliefs that they just compartmentalize on Sunday, and then they go about their job and they do good research. You know, they follow scientific principles. But you can point to contemporary examples of religious suppression of science, such as the prohibition on stem cell research. And most of the arguments against stem cell research are not really from a philosophical or humanist point of view. They're really from a religious dogmatic point of view. Another way you could talk about the religious harmful effects on society, it would be just to talk about censorship, and you could talk about Draw Muhammad Day, for example, and say, what were the original motives for Draw Muhammad Day? What was it about that incident with the Danish newspaper? You could talk about why was a fatwa put on Salman Rushdie for writing the satanic verses. All sorts of censorships. Why is it punishable by death to proselytize in a Muslim world? And other harmful things from religion you could talk about would be gay rights, and I could just leave that there. Sexism. It was a very big problem in our very recent past in our country, in the U.S., but I see the sexism problem coming from religion, that women should be subservient to their men, and women still aren't allowed to have these high-level positions in churches, like you can't have a woman priest. And there are roles for men and women that are defined in a way that might not fit everyone. But in the past, the subservience of women was really maintained in the U.S. by husbands just having a few verses to clobber their wives over the head with. If you're not subservient to me like it says in this Bible, then I'll tell the pastor, and he'll tell you you're going to hell. So, you could also talk about religious con artists, such as faith healers, and how that's a blight on society. And, when I talk about faith healers, I like to talk about how there are some religious sects, especially in Catholicism, where there's a lot of religious education that kind of mirrors what you would get in a normal university. Like, say, when I had one of my majors being psychology, there are priests who are trained classically in psychology so that they can minister to their flock. But when you look at other sects of Christianity, it seems like anyone can just wake up one day and put a sign out in front of a building and say, "Hey, I'm a church, give me money. We will be healing this weekend." And they will get people to come, So the accreditation of a lot of the con artist faith healing churches is something that I like to talk about with friends of the religious persuasion. Even if I'm not trying to convert or deconvert a religious person, I do think that it's important to talk about that issue, just to inoculate the more rational religious people from being, falling victim to things like that. So, I'd say we're probably 2/3 through the video. There'll be a red line. Like 2/3 of the way, it'll be boop right there. That's my guess. I don't know, really. So, there are things that I have talked about with people here on YouTube and in real life that have caused fights. And, my purpose was to spread some rational thinking from me to them, but it didn't really work out that way. An argument that religion somehow denies the basic human rights of children is probably going to start a lot of fights. I've had this argument, and I do believe that there are things that you could consider mental abuse that come from religion. Now, I've already said that Violently Graceful can talk forever about the problem of hell. But another aspect of the problem of hell is that it terrorizes little children. And hell, damnation, sin being, you know, magical wrongness that you're born with if you believe in the doctrine of original sin. But even if you don't believe in original sin, the application of other forms of sin as a teaching can also be mental abuse for children. They can think that because they stole a cookie out of the cookie jar that they need to pray fervently, and then if something bad happens, they'll think that that magic wrongness was still stuck to them. Kind of like karma. And, karma as a superstitious religious teaching from other religions would also be something that you could construe as mental abuse of children. But once you bring children into any conversation, you're pretty much going to be inflaming people's emotions. And I've learned this and learned this and learned this, and sometimes the conversation still goes there, but I am still in search of a way to tackle that issue without really pissing people off. There's also an argument that if you are to teach a child religion, you could be denying them access to knowledge. I've brought this up in videos before. When I talk about nowadays there are parents who won't let their children watch Harry Potter. That's just like when I was a kid and my mom wouldn't let me watch Star Wars because of the Force. Another aspect of the denial of knowledge that I had was music, and Violently Graceful also had this problem. It wasn't until I was in my teens that I really got to explore music the way that I wanted to, and I was very interested in rock and roll. But before I was able to really explore music, I had seen little bits here and there, and one anecdotal story that I have is that I saw the music video for Van Halen's song Jump on Entertainment Tonight because I was allowed to watch things on broadcast TV before the watershed before I had a bedtime. And when I saw this music video, I really liked Van Halen, but I wasn't allowed to listen to the radio. I wasn't allowed to listen to rock and roll, anything that would make your body gyrate. So later, when I was not living in the same situation where I was growing up in such a strict religious environment, one of my friends asked me what I thought about the band Van Halen. And I told him that I thought Eddie Van Halen was a really good pianist. And to think that I'm a moderately accomplished amateur musician now. It blows my mind to think that I did not even know what Eddie Van Halen was really famous for. And that is something that I chalk up to the denial of access to knowledge. Um, Another argument that I've had with people that it pisses me off as the atheist, and not it doesn't piss off the Christian or the theist, but it really pisses me off all the answers, um, all the hoops people jump through to get some sort of answer back to you, but none of them make sense to me. It's the argument from God's silence. That would be, why does God rely on people and books to contact me? The best way I can think of to contact me would be to telepathically beam information into my head, and if he's all powerful, he could be doing this. The next best way to contact me would be on Skype, Facebook, email, what have you, but even that doesn't happen. God relies on, a 2,000-year-old book, and some people love to point out what age the book was made in without realizing that different periods went through different Iron and Bronze ages. That, that would, when you say stuff like that, that pisses off your Christian theist friends. But the answers that I get to this question, like why doesn't God talk to me directly to get me to believe if it's so important, and my eternal outcome is hinging on whether or not I believe? Why doesn't God just tell me directly? Why don't I get proof directly from him? Why all the rigmarole? Why all the tricks? Why would God, not just say it? Hey, here I am. And all the free will arguments in the world really do is piss me off. All of them fall flat with me. So that's why that's an argument that I'll talk about it, but it's not really one that I recommend if you're trying to keep civil with people. Then there's abusive anti-theist's favorite argument. Now, abusive anti-theist J. Delphiki 42 and I have had some discussions about the argument from divine hiddenness, and it's my belief that it's not the best argument against the existence of any God. It's really dependent on how you define the God and what the God's intentions and powers are. But J. Delphiki 42, Julian, he has other reasons that he doesn't like the argument from divine hiddenness, but it's still abusive anti-theist's favorite. And you wouldn't have to look that hard at all three of our channels to find us, discussing that back and forth. I guess the last thing that I would talk about with someone who was a theist, that if all of these other things just fell flat and nothing else worked, I would probably talk about which parts of the Bible are literal and which parts are metaphorical. I would have to use a lot of science, based on which story someone was taking literally, and I would, pretty much take book by book, chapter by chapter of the Bible, compare it to, take any claims that it makes about, science, and say, is this good science or bad science? And I got one of my friends, just based on a talk about Genesis, to retract into a different sort of Christianity where the story of creation in Genesis was just metaphorical. And then I moved on to the story of Noah and the ark, and got my friend to relent that, yeah, there was no iceberg that took the penguins back. It doesn't explain away kangaroos and other marsupials and the platypus, I got him to consider, how if the water levels rose, where did all the water go? If it was a flood all the way around the earth, you can pretty much do that with geology now. You could look at global warming estimates, like if every bit of ice on the entire earth were to be melted, then where did the water go? Because the water table would only be raised, maybe 50 feet if all the water on the planet were to be melted and just pooled into the oceans. So, and then if there was enough water to push the circumference of the earth that much thicker, then what would happen to the air pressure? Would that be good or bad, for human life? Now, we're getting into a lot of magic here, and just things like how do you keep two lions on a ship for 40 days without having them eat other species out of existence? And how did Noah keep every germ that affects human beings alive on that boat? Because you'd have to have one of his daughters have Clapagon or herpesiphyllades, and then you'd have to have one of his sons have like Ebola, and pretty much with just that little amount of people, the world's fucked because they're passing around all these diseases, or else the diseases will die because God cares about germs, right? And you would put the germs on the boat. So a lot of these germs, they're not something that can live outside of the human body for more than a couple minutes, like HIV, which only started in the 80s that we know, maybe late 70s. And talking about biology such as bacteria that evolved to eat nylon when nylon didn't exist before a certain point, or talking about HIV and how it must have mutated, which proves evolution, or even asking why would God create all these harmful bacteria for us in the first place. That goes back to the problem of evil more than just, evolution or the literal versus metaphorical part of arguing against the Bible. So I got my friend to let go of the story of Noah and declare that metaphorical. And little by little, you could go through the Bible and say, okay, this magic, it couldn't happen without there being copious amounts of magic, and even the word magic sometimes pisses off Christians because they like to consider miracles as being completely different than other magics, even though pretty much they're made of the same type of physics and science twisting stuff. But to call things magic is to rob them of the God ingredient, because once you take a story with magical properties in it and you add a little God on top, then the magic is completely believable. And it's not magic anymore, it's a miracle. So look out for that if you're talking to a really hardcore and sheltered Christian. And maybe, just maybe, if all these other things have failed and you're trying to just go through each story in the Bible and talk it over with them, and you've gotten them to consider a lot of other things in the Bible metaphor, maybe you could get them to consider whether or not someone coming back from the dead would be metaphor or not really credible. Because it seems to me that is a sticking point of Christianity. You must believe in a lot of the things that Jesus did, and the most important one is he came back from the dead. If you don't believe that, then you're pretty much not a Christian anymore. You're some kind of weird Bible scholar. So that's the end of my ramble. Losoyo, I hope you enjoyed it. Everybody else, the link to his video is down there, and you can make your own video trying to answer how you would approach deconverting a best friend who is pretty much like you in most every other way.